Hi, so today we're going to be doing foiling and factoring on Easy as Pie. Okay, so I dropped my marker. You can see that. I don't know why I put that in. Okay, so we're going to start with foiling. So what is FOIL? FOIL is an acronym, so each letter has a word, and it's just a way to remember a process. So F stands for first, O stands for outer, I stands for inner, and L stands for last. And this is what we do when we multiply two like x plus or x minus something things together. Okay, so we use FOIL when we have something like this problem right here. Okay, so remember we're multiplying those two parentheses, so we can't just multiply the x and the 3 and the 8. So we have to use FOIL. Let me just write that down there. Okay, so I'm actually just gonna write up and down. I did dashes in this. They look like negative signs. I promise they're not. Okay, so F equals first, right? So the first step to doing this is to multiply the first two together. So the x is the first in both sets of parentheses. So we're just going to multiply the x and the x. So that's not a negative, that's just a dash. X times x, we know that x times x is x squared. So for the F, we have x squared. Just going to put a box to make sure you can see that. Okay, so it's basically like adding all of them. So you might have already figured out O is outer, so we've got negative 8 times x, or x times negative 8. So we get minus 8x. Okay, I is inner. 3 times x are our inner terms, so they're on the inside of the equation. 3 times x, so we get 3x. And then 3 times negative 8. So that is minus 24. So now that we have that, let's just write them all down. X squared minus 8x plus 3x minus 24. We are almost done, but you will notice that we have like terms. The negative 8 and the 3 would make a negative 5. So we have to combine like terms. Because remember, you can't combine x squareds with x's or numbers with x's, but if you have x's, you can combine them. So it just goes to x squared minus 5x minus 24. That is our answer. Okay, so that is how we do that. I'm going to do a little bit more on this. Okay, so how do we know when to FOIL? Well, I'm going to write down two problems, and we're going to figure out why or why not we need to FOIL for them. Because this is important. You don't want to FOIL at the wrong times. Okay, the times is obviously not an x. Okay, so for that one, we do FOIL because 2 plus x, we don't know what x equals, so we cannot get the 2 and the x to be one term. We have to FOIL it. Now for this, 2 times x is 2x. We can get it to be one term. We do not need to FOIL this equation. So you only FOIL pretty much if it's like x plus something times x plus something, not x times something. Okay. So what if we have x minus 9 squared? How do we get this so that we can FOIL it? Well, you have to remember that squaring something is multiplying it or timesing it by itself. So if it's just timesing it by itself, we can just rewrite this equation as x minus 9 times x minus 9, because it's x minus 9 times itself squared. So FOIL, okay, those are not negatives, just dashes. Okay, we got the first terms are x and x. The outer terms are negative 9 and x, so minus 9x. Inner terms are also minus 9x. And last, 81, because negative times negative equals a positive. Okay, so with like things squared, it's going to be the same for the outer and inner terms, okay? So we're just going to rewrite all our terms back there. Minus 18x. That should be a plus 81. That's my fault. I apologize. I confused myself with the dashes. I should not have put those. Okay, so moving on. So x minus 8, x plus 8. Well, believe it or not, we do not need to FOIL them. Okay? Like FOIL, but psych, we do not have to FOIL this equation. Okay? We just do a new one called FL. That means other things too, but for now it's just the math turn. We just have to do the first and last. But why? It doesn't make sense. Well, it will in a moment. You will not get it wrong if you FOIL the equation. So I'm going to show you what happens, and then that will help explain why we do not need to FOIL this equation. Well, first I can tell you that negative 8 and 8 will always cancel to 0. You know that. But let's just go and show a little more why we do not need to FOIL this equation. So the first terms, x times x, x squared. Sorry about the dashes again. They are not negative signs. Okay. Plus 8x minus 8x minus 64. Okay? So as you may already be able to see, when we write this down, x squared, that goes to 0x. When you have a minus something and a plus of the same thing in the equation, the outer and inner terms are going to cancel out. So we only need to do our first and last terms. Hopefully that makes sense. If you accidentally FOIL one of these, you'll still get it right. Just a little more work. Okay, so it will be the same thing if you have this equation. The outer and inner will cancel out, so we only do the first and last. Okay. Moving on. So remember, just FL means first and last. Okay. So let's just do some practice problems here. Figure out how to do them all just for a little more practice, then we'll be done with this. First terms, x squared. Outer terms, minus 1x. Inner terms, minus 9x. Outer terms, plus 9. Okay? So that'll simplify to x squared minus 10x plus 9. Sorry about the messy handwriting. It was kind of a tight space. Okay? So if you notice and you were observant, you would notice that we do not have to FOIL this. It's just first and last. Okay? So we have first terms, x squared, last terms, minus 9. That one was pretty fast, as you can see, since we don't have to FOIL it. Okay, now remember, if you're squaring something, it's just timesing it by itself. I know people want you to say multiplying. I say timesing. I'm a normal kid. Well, teenager, whatever. Okay, so we do all those steps. 16. Okay, so then get our answer, x squared plus 8x plus 16. Alright, so that's that. Okay, so let's move on to factoring. So factoring is a reverse math, pretty much, of foiling. Okay? So that's important to remember. So factoring is a new concept, so it's kind of hard to learn at first. But what is the goal of factoring? All right? Echo. Shh. So you want to be able to FOIL your answer to get the original question. So we want to get an answer that we are able to FOIL. So x plus or minus something times x plus or minus something. And when we FOIL it, it should get the question that we factored. If that doesn't make sense, that's okay, because I'm about to show you it. Okay, so what if we have x squared plus 8x plus 12? That's what something that we factor looks like. It always has an x squared, a something and an x, and then a number at the end. So our first step here, we have to find, so our first thing we want to do, we have to find two numbers. The numbers have to multiply to 12, and they have to add to 8. And how do we get those numbers? Well, it always has to multiply to the number at the end and add to the number before the x, okay? So let's start by finding what the factors of 12. So what goes into 12, and then we'll see if any of them add to 8. Okay, so 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 times 4 is 12. So, but which one of these adds to 8, okay? Because they have to add to 8 and multiply 12. 1 plus 12 is not 8. 2 plus 6, though, is 8. So our numbers are 2 and 6. All right, so because it equals 8. So let's just really quick confirm that our numbers fit all the requirements. So I'm just going to write our numbers here. So does 2 times 6 equal 12? It does. So we can put a check there. And does 2 plus 6 equal 8? Yes, it does. So we have two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 8 now. So now what do we do with those numbers? Let me just rewrite them over there. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to take this x squared, okay? And remember, we want an answer that we can FOIL, so we're going to split it to x plus 2 times x plus 6, because it's a positive 6, so it's plus 6, not minus 6. Okay, so I don't know why it's in slow-mo there. Oops. Okay, so anyway, now we have x plus 2 times x plus 6 as our answer. So how do we know that this is the same thing as the beginning and that is factored? Well, let's try and FOIL this, because that's our goal, to get something that will FOIL to the original answer. So how do we know it works? Oh, there's a robin. So the first term, x times x, x squared, right? Outer term is plus 6x. Inner term is plus 2x. Outer term is plus 12. We get x squared plus 8x plus 12. So when we use those two numbers and we're able to FOIL them, we will get the same thing at the end. So that's how we know we did it right. So our answer is x plus 2 times x plus 6. And that's why you need those two numbers, so that your inner and outer terms make the 8x. Okay, mind blown, because it multiplied back. Maybe it's not, I don't know. But, yeah. Okay, so let's just do another one of those just to get a little more used to the process of doing this, okay? So we need two numbers, and what do they have to be? They have to multiply to 3, and what do they have to add to? -4, okay? Because those are our numbers, okay? So we gotta find factors of 3, but because they have to multiply to a negative, we're going to have to use two negative numbers, because two negative numbers multiplied are a positive number, two negative numbers added together are a negative number. Okay, so we're just going to do the negative factors of 3. So, yeah, so we need two negative numbers. Okay, well, the first ones that come to mind, -3 and -1, and then -2 and 2. But -3 times -1 works because, oops, I don't know what I did there, sorry. So -3 times -1 is 3. Negative times a negative is a positive. So that they work for that. -3 plus -1 is -4. So those two numbers work. Those are the numbers we're going to use. -3, -1, okay? So then do you remember what to do next? So x minus 3, because we get the 3 from there, times x minus 1, okay? Now, that's our answer. If you want to double check, if you're unsure since it's new. So if you want proof, let's FOIL it, because let's prove it. All right, first terms. All right, yeah, we'll write FOIL just because it's a good thing to do. So x squared, outer terms, minus x, or minus 1x. Inner terms, minus 3x. And last terms, plus 3, x squared, minus 4x, plus 3. So hopefully you get why we have to do the numbers, because they will multiply to the last one, and the inner and outer will be the x term. So what if we have something like 2x squared plus 4x minus 6? Well, we cannot just get our two numbers because of this 2. He's causing all sorts of problems, and he deserves a timeout. Unfortunately, things don't really work that way, so we're going to have to find a way to get rid of the 2. Okay? Well, what do we notice about the numbers in this equation? Well, they all divide by 2. So if you have something before your x squared, always check, because it might divide out. So we have to have the 2 over here, so 2 times, then we just divide everything by 2. 2x squared over 2 is 2. 4x over 2 is 2x. -6 over 2 is -3. So we're just dividing everything by 2. Okay? So now we just have 2 times and then a regular factoring thing. So we're just going to find our two numbers that times to -3 and add to 2. Okay? Well, the first numbers that come to mind are -3 and 1, or -1 and 3. Zara, shh. So, and we know that that will equal -2. That will equal +2 if we add the numbers. So -1 and 3 are our numbers. Okay, so we're just going to write those down. So then we just do, we cannot get rid of the 2, but 2 times x minus 1 times x plus 3. That is our final answer. If we were to FOIL this out, you would just FOIL the x minus 1 times the x plus 3. We would get x squared plus 2x. So then we would have to keep the 2 there. If we multiply the 2 by everything, we would get 2x squared plus 4x minus 6, which is our original equation. So you know your answer is 2 times x minus 1 times x plus 3. Hopefully this kind of FOILing makes sense now. Okay, so now what if we have 4x squared plus 5x plus 1? So we cannot get rid of the 4 by dividing everything by 4, because you don't want decimals, okay? It just doesn't work that way. Okay, so you can't divide anything out of this equation to make it simpler. So we're going to have to find another way. So we're still going to have to find two numbers, but they are not going to be to 1 and 5, okay? Because the 4 changes everything. So we need our two numbers. They should, okay, they're going to multiply and add. So they're going to add to 5. That's normal. It stays the same. But they're going to multiply to the number before the x times the last number. So they're going to multiply to 4 times 1. So they're going to multiply to 4 instead of 1 in this case. Okay? So it's going to have to multiply to 4 and add to 5. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, that's always going to be your first step. So we're not going to, first we have to find our numbers, I'm sorry. So what numbers times to 4? Well, we have 1 times 4 is the first one that comes to me. We obviously have 2 times 2. That's not going to work. So 1 times 4 equals 5. 2 times 2 equals 4. Plus. That one's not going to work. So our numbers are 1 and 4. Hopefully you can see that, even though I just kind of confused my own self. I'm not good at talking. So instead of adding in numbers, we're going to split the x. Okay, so instead of plus 5x, we're going to now have plus 1x and plus 4x, because 1 and 4 are our numbers, okay? We know that 1 plus 4 equals 5, so that's how we get that, okay? So now what do we realize? Well, the 4x squared and the 4x have numbers in common, and so do the 1x plus 1. So we're going to rewrite it so that the things with similar numbers can be grouped together so that we can divide things out of the numbers, okay? We're going to group those two together. So what goes into 4x squared and 4x? Well, a 4 and an x. Don't forget that you can take out x's sometimes, okay? So 4x squared divided by x just leaves you with an x. A good way to think of that is 4 times, because 4x squared is 4 times x, so if you're getting rid of 4x, you just have 1x. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. 4x divided by 4x is just 1, so plus 1. Okay, now what can we take out of both 1x and 1? Well, just 1. Okay, so 1 times, what do we have left? X plus 1. Okay, so we have the same thing in both parentheses, so that's how we know we did it right so far. We're not completely done, okay? We're going to take these two numbers outside of the parentheses and make them a parenthesis. So 4x plus 1 is a parenthesis, and then x plus 1 is a parenthesis. So that is our answer. Let's FOIL this out to make sure we got the answer right, okay? Gonna rewrite it up there. Times x plus 1, okay? It's a bad 1, I'm sorry. So, first, 4x times x is 4x squared. Outer, 4x times 1 is 4x. Inner, plus 1x. Okay, outer, plus 1. Alright, 4x squared plus 5x plus 1. That is our original equation. So that is always how we factor these equations that have something before the x squared. So let's try another one of those. Okay. So we have 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. Okay. Alright, so nothing divides out of them. Okay. So, our two numbers, what are we going to have to do for our two numbers? Well, hopefully you remember from last time. If not, you can look back. Alright. They're going to add to 3, that's normal. And they're going to multiply to the number 4, the x squared, times the last number. 2 times 1 is 2. So they're going to have to multiply to 2, not 1. Okay, let's find our numbers. What numbers multiply to 2? Well, the numbers that come to me are 2 and 1. Okay, 2 plus 1 equals 3. 2 and 1 work in this equation. Our numbers are 2 and 1. Hopefully you're getting good at finding the numbers. Not just use a calculator to try to find them if you have bigger numbers. Okay, so we don't put it in parentheses yet, we split the x. Okay, so we have 2x and 1x, because that makes 3x. So this time the numbers with similar things that could divide out of them are next to each other, so we don't need to rearrange this equation. We don't always need to rearrange. Okay, so I'm just going to rewrite them so that they're closer together, so it's easier for you guys to see what I'm doing here. 2x squared plus 2x are similar, plus 1x and plus 1 are similar. What goes out of this? A 2 and an x. Do not forget that the x can divide out, or else your equation will be wrong. Okay, 2x times, what do we got left? X plus 1. Okay, only 1 can come out of these. Okay, so got 1, because that's what we divided out of it, times x plus 1. These two are the same. We know we did it right. We put the numbers out of the parentheses together. So 2x plus 1 in parentheses. Okay, times what we have in the parentheses, x plus 1. All right. So if we FOIL this out, we would get 2x plus 3x plus 1. So this equation looks the same as the last one, except for we notice one different thing. It has a 0 at the end. It equals 0, okay? That will change how we do this equation. So we'll find our two numbers. That's the same as last time. So, sorry, I wrote the wrong thing. So they have to add 2, 9. That's normal. They have to multiply 2 times 9, because the number 4, the x squared, and the n number, okay? So that would be 18. Let's find our numbers. Okay. Well, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 6 and 3. We know that those two will not work. 6 and 3 work because 6 plus 3 is 9. Hopefully you can see that our numbers are 6 plus 3, or 6 and 3 rather. Okay, so remember we split the x because there is something before the x squared. 2x squared plus 6x plus 3x plus 9. Don't forget the equals 0, okay? It's causing us problems, but we cannot forget about it. Okay, so you'll notice that 2x and squared and 6x have stuff that multiply out. 2x multiplies out time. So x plus 3, I meant to put a 3 there, yeah. Okay, a 3 comes out of those ones. I went through that part kind of fast, but if you need to pause the video, figure it out really quick, you can. Okay, those two are the same. We know we did it correctly so far. So don't forget the equals 0. So we have 2x plus 3 times x plus 3 equals 0. Okay? So if you FOIL that out, you would get the original thing, but we're not done yet. We cannot forget the equals 0, okay? So I'm just going to rewrite our answer so far there, but that's not our final answer yet. Because in this case, since it's an equals 0, we want to find x, okay? So if you have anything times something and it equals 0, one of the two things have to equal 0. So let's say we had x times y equals 0. Well, since anything times 0 is 0, we know one of them has to be 0. Okay? So let's say x equals 0 or y equals 0, because let's say that y equals 7, then x would obviously have to equal 0. Okay, if that doesn't make sense, just know that one of these has to be equal to 0, okay? I'm bad at explaining things. So either 2x plus 3 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. Okay? So it's just a simple equation from there. We get the x by itself, x equals -3, or x equals -1.5. Both can equal 0 as well, which should make sense to you. Okay, so then after that, you have to plug in what you have for x into the equation, because sometimes one of them won't work. So that's our original problem that I'm writing there. Okay. So I'm going to plug in negative 1.5 for x to see if that one works. Okay. Plus 9 equals 0. Okay. So then when we do this equation, what we're going to get is 4.5 plus, I can't even read what I wrote there because something's blocking it in my view. But anyway, to make a long story short, you're going to get negative 9 plus 9 equals 0, 0 equals 0. So this one is going to work. Okay, I'm going to go through this one pretty fast. Negative 3 is also going to work in our equation. Okay, so once you get your x's, you just have to plug them into the equation to see if they both work. They typically will in this type of problem. It's in the square roots that they really usually don't. But so your final answer is just x equals negative 1.5 or x equals negative 3, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. That was kind of confusing how I explained it. So we're going to do one more of those. X squared minus 9 minus 52 equals 0. Okay. This one's just a simple factoring equation. We're just going to find our two numbers. Okay, they have to multiply to negative 52, add to negative 9. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the factors. The numbers that first come to my brain are negative 13 and 4. Whoops, I forgot a negative. There we go. So, those are our numbers, okay? So, x minus 13 times x plus 4. This is just a very basic factoring problem, as like the first ones I did. Oh, that should be a 9x. I'm really sorry about that. I just realized it now. So then equals 0. So x minus 13 equals 0 or x plus 4 equals 0. So when you get your parentheses, you set them both equal to 0. Simple equation, get x by itself. X has to equal 13 or x equals negative 4. Okay, I plugged them both in. They did both work. Okay. So, but let's say we were solving for x and we had this triangle, okay? So let's say this was a this is a triangle. Let's say that's what we were doing this equation for. We got these for our x's. Remember that if you're doing something where it's the distance has to be positive because you cannot have negative distance. So I'm just going to go through this one pretty fast here. So we find our two numbers. Okay. It's not 32 and 1, not 4 and 8, but it is 16 and 2. 16 and 2 would be our numbers here. Again, I'm going really fast. So x plus 16 times x plus 2 equals 0. X plus 16 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. X equals negative 16. X equals negative 2. You plug them in. They both work. Okay? If only one worked, then you would just have one answer for x. But in this case, there was two answers that worked for x. So this is where we might get one where an answer does not work for x. Let's say we had root of u plus 6 equals u. Now, how is this a factoring equation? Well, if you watched my last video, you would know that the square root and squared are opposite functions. So to get rid of this square root sign, because we want the square root sign gone, we have to square it. But what we do to one side of the equation, we must do to both. So we get u plus 6, because the square root's gone, equals u squared. Now, to factor something, because remember it has a u squared, a u, and a number, the u squared has to be positive. It will not work if the u squared is negative. Okay, so we have to subtract everything to this side of the equation. Okay, we're going to get 0 equals u squared minus u minus 6. Okay? So, we have to find our two numbers, so negative 6. So we get negative 3 and 2 are going to be our numbers. All right, hopefully you've gotten good at finding those. All right, u minus 3 times u plus 2 rather, I'm sorry, equals 0. We set both of our answers equal to 0. So we get those. So we get u equals 3 or u equals -2. So for these square root ones, 1 probably won't work. Okay, so I'm just going to erase this. We're going to plug in our numbers. All right, so remember we got u equals 3, u equals -2. I'm just going to write them a little bigger there. So we're going to plug them both in. Oh, sorry, this is squared, so we're not in the original problem. So we take the original problem. So 3 plus 6, root of 3 plus 6 equals 3. Well, root of 9 does equal 3. So 3 will work for you, okay? Now let's try the other one. So we have -2 plus 6 equals -2, because -2 is u, so we just plug that in. Well, root of 4, -2, but 2 does not equal -2, so u equals 3 is the only answer that will work for this problem. U equals 3 is our answer. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helped you out.
There's a crazy little shack beyond the tracks.